This is Jeffrey Tucker, Brownstone Institute. These are the exciting days in the aftermath of the release of the Fauci Diaries, which have given us revelations that we've sought for the last 6.5 years. They provide an unprecedented look into his thinking. They're not entirely honest, but what they are is a first draft of an autobiography that he hoped to write. So I would say they're inadvertently transparent in the sense that you get to track where he was in his mind along the way, which gives us a sense of how it came to be that this calamity befell the world, starting with the lockdowns, the censorship, the school closures, the church closures, the business failures, essentially the widespread attack on civilization itself, resulting in the great inoculation with a experimental technology that was rushed to completion and then forced upon people all over the world. It's a scandal for the age, as far as I'm concerned. So we've just been pouring through these documents over the last week and a half, 10 days. And apparently there's more to come besides just the Slack messages, emails, and diary entries. Senator Johnson has reported that they now have Anthony Fauci's cell phone. Now, just to be clear, Fauci was never the COVID czar, but he exercised enormous power by virtue of his connection to media. So in a fame-soaked, celebrity-driven world, he had de facto totalitarian powers, essentially. So it makes sense that he would be the primary target. Is it a limited hangout? Of course, everything is. The whole truth is not out yet. That's going to take years, but fortunately, thanks to the persistence of some, we now have what we need to get the process towards justice and truth and reckoning going. So my partner in this whole thing has been Dr. Jessica Rose, a wonderful microbiologist, I guess you call yourself, Jessica. It's wonderful to have you here.
Yeah, finally, we found a time that suits both of us to reconnect, and it's prescient because wow, these documents that are coming into the light are, I mean, they're not surprising to me. However, there are components of it that still leave me kind of in disbelief because as I've been trying to explain to a few people, it's one thing to intuitively kind of know that you're right about a lot of things, but to see it written down in black and white by the very person who's been saying the opposite, it's jarring. I don't know. I know how how I'm feeling because you're probably having the same experience, like reading some of these words, but it's validating. But I mean, the point of all of this is to, seek recompense for the injured people and also to ensure that, this doesn't happen again. And I'd like to ask your opinion on whether or not you think that's going to be the outcome in all of this.
Well, I don't know. I take all this step by step. I just first want the truth out there. And what I feel has happened, at least in American political culture and American public life, is that the tables have suddenly turned. We've been working for this moment for 6.5 years. And now suddenly the attitudes have changed completely. It's like that scene in The Godfather where Michael flips the script and everything changes. All the previous alliances start scrambling to try to reconfigure things, and that's sort of where the media is right now. We just got through a morning of a contempt vote for Fauci for having pleaded the Fifth Amendment 111 times, and it went straight down party lines, which is very strange. Which means the Democrats are still supporting Fauci. It seems to me politically unwise, but maybe somehow necessary for them. So I think we're in a pivotal moment here.
So do I. And I think these phone calls that we're hopefully going to have access to are going to reveal even more. I mean, I I was thinking today about them. I try and get into the heads of people that I'm looking at and that I'm writing articles about because I want to be fair, primarily. I never, seek to destroy, unlike some people. I just really, like you, I want to know the truth. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder how many people whose names, because I actually asked Grok to give me a comprehensive list of every single name that is in one of the Fauci emails on this 3,000-page email disclosure. And it's really long. And I was wondering, like, are those people kind of like, biting on their fingernails right now, like waiting and wondering with anxiety, like who's going to come up, who's going to see it, who's going to like post it on X or whatever? Because basically that's what I'm doing right now. I'm combing through looking for verifications, validations, mostly on the subject matter of the shots, because that's my niche, the biology of it all. But yeah, I'm wondering, like, what's the energy like in the circle of people who basically made this all happen, and what are they thinking now that those phone calls are going to come out? Because the things that they can't say in the emails, and there's a lot of stuff in those emails that is incriminating, if you ask me. That stuff is said in phone calls. So, yeah, I'm bracing myself.
Yeah, and if Fauci made right, and Fauci made himself the sort of center of communication and organizing for the entire pandemic response, which annoyed many people at the time. In fact, he had no official power. He was one member of a coronavirus task force.
Mm-hmm.
But by virtue of his celebrity status, his connections to the military, to the intelligence community, and by his sort of glib, nonstop public appearances, made himself enormously powerful. He was in touch with everything and everybody. Just made himself the sort of godfather of the COVID response. So he had to be in touch with essentially all reporters, all heads of foundations, all every big shot in the English speaking world, certainly, if not beyond that. So we've got an entire establishment that seems to be on the verge of completely crumbling right now as a result. I mean, it was a centralized response, centralized in Fauci as the voice, but everybody went to him, and now I think we're going to see everything just completely discredited. I do want to say at the outset what I've always wondered about all along was Fauci's motivation. Let's set aside the idea that he was interested in the science or interested in public health. So what was he doing? Why was he doing 12 interviews a day? Why was he working 16 hours a day? Why was he keeping constantly in touch with all the stars and all the influencers and pretending to be the voice of science for all these years? And I think it was all a defensive strategy to keep himself from being blamed for what he knew were his fingerprints on the virus itself, on the lab leak, and the gain-of-function research that went into it. So it was a kind of a scramble on his part to cover his ass in, I guess you could say. Do you agree with that?
Can't say I disagree because of what I saw, at the hearing today. Was he in contempt? And this horde of people said no. He's very protected, man. It's unbelievable how they're sticking to their guns on this, because I agree completely with you. That's a mistake, man. That's a big mistake, because as you said, his tentacles went everywhere. Everywhere. I mean, he had contacts. I'm going through this email, the list of emails. It's like 3,500 pages now. He was approached by like dozens of people from all over the world. I mean, the guy, I can't imagine what the guy was going through. And I'm not saying I feel bad for him, but everybody was emailing this guy. I have this idea. I have this idea. Right now I'm speaking about the early treatment options, by the way, back in March 2020, that medical doctors and pharmacists on the ground and all sorts of people with all sorts of expertise were like, listen, we ran this trial. We had these results with this drug. you should consider it as an option. This kind of framework was being sent to him constantly in the beginning because everyone was freaked out, right? Nothing was done with that, of course. That was all, as you very well know, it was shifted to the wayside because they already had the mRNA, Moderna specifically, in the pipeline. So, yeah, Lamb. Yeah, he covered his tracks at the same time as, appointing himself the science. There's no other way to say it. I mean, he completely dominated the space, and he still is, apparently. I mean, they're still in reverence of this guy without even considering all of these words that came out of his mouth. It's like contradiction after contradiction is what I'm finding. It's like what he's saying to these people in private, is the complete opposite from what he was proposing to these, 16 interviews with CNN or whatever he was doing. Like that post I made today about natural immunity. I think that was back in March 2020 as well. He told a CNN reporter that, you have robust immunity if you've been exposed to SARS-2. Just came out and said it. It was you're fine. So what happened to that?
Yeah, thank you for finding that one. I missed. That's funny, but that was one of them because I did a 30-page summary of it. I somehow missed that one. So yeah. So he's endorsing. He's telling his friends in the media, "Don't worry about it. If you've been exposed, you've got robust and broad immunity. So just move on with your life." But he never said that to the American people. I think actually he denied it at some point that we're still looking into that. We don't know if there's immunity or not.
It was one of these flippy floppies he did, like with the masks. So he's on record saying wear them and don't wear them, in the same breath type thing. Another thing, I'm not sure if you noticed, I can't remember if I posted the screenshot today. Sometimes when I see something really like, I post it right away without writing about it. Somebody had proposed to him an hypothesis as to why the children weren't getting affected by COVID. And it related to childhood vaccines that were giving them protection. You right? So this was an interesting idea, and the person said, like, this is really worth exploring because this could actually lead to a solution to adults, depending on what is giving the cross-reactive immunity, for example, if he was correct. It's a huge question because we're talking about the children here. Like, you remember that? Did you see that? Did I post that?
Yeah, and he was never even curious about the gradient of risk. I mean, his view was, well, if it spreads among kids, we have to close all the classrooms for forever. I mean, for 2 years or whatever it was. So here he is sitting on an email with a guy going, look, I have a theory as to why the kids aren't getting sick, and they weren't. Right. So, there's the paper trail here is just immense. He had one goal and one goal only, which was to deploy the mRNA technology and get it into as many arms as possible to try and experiment on the population. He used the children to do it. I mean, it's so these kinds of considerations, what's interesting to me, and the thing that I'm a little bit shocked about, I am genuinely shocked by this, that after all this stuff comes out, I might have expected the national media to comb through the diaries and start writing articles about the specifics within them. They have not done that. There was one day when they said there's some diaries, it's mostly just gossip, and celebrities fanboying Fauci, and nothing to see here. That was essentially the stories. So I appreciate all the work you've done in digging through them. I have a question though for you. You said 3,000 pages of emails. Where are these part of Rand's reading room?
No, this is separate, and I found this when I started digging. Doing my research on that Gallo article that I that I posted on my Substack. So this is called Leopold NIH FOIA Anthony Fauci emails. And it's a PDF file, and it's 3,234 pages long. So I guess that this is an independent FOIA request by this person, Leopold, and I'm not even sure that's a real name or if that's a pseudonym. So this is separate from that. It's very illuminating. It's additive to the Rand Paul disclosures. I love that because I love multiple sources, because then you can paint a really fair and clear picture. It's there is overlap. I've noticed that. Like I'll do a keyword search for a name, for example, and I'll find the same email that I found in the Rand Paul disclosures sometimes. But I mean, we're looking at 3,000 pages here. I think the longest, the Tony Fauci diary, was like 1,100 pages, right? So it's like 3 times long. Not a lot of repetition. I find in a lot of these FOIA requests that there's, you've noticed that there's a lot of repetition in the emails, but there's not much here. It's like one long string going back. I haven't, I'm not systematically going page by page through this because that's too much of an endeavor. I'm doing keyword searches based on like what I really want to know, like how long were they planning this mRNA thing? Like how far does that go back? Was that ever not going to be the only solution? Clearly, it was only, this was too important to them. There was too much invested. I think it's deeper than that, although I haven't figured out why. Besides the fact that I believe that this was the segue to, make this platform the only platform that we're going to be using for all vaccines in the future, which does seem to be the case because they're doing it for the flu now. Yeah, it's so yeah, that was the long answer.
Maybe after we finish here, I guess I'm gonna have to dig around for this, and maybe you can just post it on your X account or send it to me through text, because I don't think I've seen this release, so that's just more reading for me to do. One of the mistakes I think, Jessica. Go ahead.
Oh, I've posted the link. Like I'm double referencing every time I make a post from it. So it's in the subtext of each screenshot. And I also put source underneath to the link. So I'll send it to you again though. It's
okay. One of the things I think is a problem here is that we have a cultural assumption nowadays that if anything's worth knowing, somebody out there is going to have summarized it for me, whether it's the New York Times or the Associated Press or one of my friends, or, the AI will give me the takeaway. There's a kind of a laziness out there that anything that's worth knowing is surely already known, and I would already know it. I mean, this is a kind of a dominant feature of our sort of literary culture, but I'm just, in this case, it doesn't work. I mean, it absolutely, you have to absolutely read the entire thing. The cliff notes don't work. The AI summaries don't work. I mean, there's just so much here. And if you use all these tools and all these official sources to get your summary of things, you're not going to get the story. That's my takeaway from this.
Sorry, I muted. There was somebody knocking. Yeah, exactly. I sent you the link, by the way, on X.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, that's so much for my weekend.
Sorry. Right. And then we get the phone calls.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. So one of the things that you noted that I was new to me, and there are many, many new things released here, but was from January 21. This is where it really gets dark, because he's getting these emails from the virologist in the UK named, I think his name is David Ho, something like that, saying, look,
Yeah.
we've got a new variant out there, and these shots are falling in efficacy dramatically. And then over the course of something like a week, basically he's, the end of which he says, well, unfortunately, the current formulas will be useless for stopping infection and spread. And at some point, Fauci even says we're going to need a better formula. We're going to have to reformulate these shots. But so he knew this, and he acknowledged that he knew this, but he forged ahead anyway with mass injection.
Yeah, it was one of the many things that he heard and then forged ahead with. It wasn't just David Ho. There was the name is eluding me now because I have so many names in my head. Oh, right. I wrote an entire article on this, and this is really important. It's my latest article on Robert Gallo. I'm really glad I remembered to talk about this. This is really important. Robert Gallo is like decades-long virology guy, like linked to HIV and polio vaccine and da-da-da. And I was astounded to see that he had reached out to Robert Kajlek, who's like Intel guy, to propose an idea to use the oral polio vaccine as a way to prevent SARS. There's some kind of rationale there. I looked it up. So it wasn't a very long email, but it was 2 pages, and it outlined the idea. And it kind of, in a way, because of the timing, it undermined the idea that we needed to develop this, warp-speeded new experimental technology, because his idea might have worked. But the most important thing that he mentioned, and you can find this in my latest article, my latest Substack, which is horribly long, I'm very sorry, was that he issued 3 warnings. And I'm going to read them because this is wild. He said, I'll read the whole passage. On a final digression, this is Francis Collins, that he was writing to after, who had responded as per or in lieu of Kajlek. I have had 36 years of on-off experiences with glycosylated spike proteins, their analyses immunologically, and especially regarding use in vaccines and developing neutralizing antibodies. I believe it will be a mistake to put most eggs in that basket. The risks, ... shortened antibody half-life, protection not correlating with neutralizing antibodies, and sometimes hazards from them. And the thing that struck me about this when I saw this warning, which was in, I think it was March, it was in May 3rd, 2020, was that in lockstep, the peer-reviewed articles started to be published, which were confirming 1, 2, 3. I mean, the third one is the one that I've been poking, at for the last 6 years, the hazards. But it's just remarkable how, once again, in May 2020, from this renowned virologist, Fauci got this information, and it was basically ignored. I even found a screenshot today, or the email, where they used the words, it wasn't booted. You can find it. I posted it on X. They kicked Gallo off the email thread, and they started talking amongst themselves because they were basically going to ignore his idea. And Collins's response was, I don't know how to respond to this guy. And Fauci's response was very short and completely redacted. So who knows what he said, and who knows what colorful language he used. But the point is, this, no matter how you feel about Gallo, this was a warning issued by a guy who knows his shit, pardon my language, way back before, anybody needed to die, be locked up, get the shots, etc. This was a specific warning against what they were doing. And they just did it anyway. And everything he predicted came to pass. Duh. I mean, yeah, I can say that because I have background in this, but like for the innocent people who didn't even know this wasn't a conventional vaccine, I mean, oh, yeah.
Yeah, there seem to be a number of, and by the way, Martin Kulldorff told me this in something I'm going to say like August of 2020. He said um, he said he keeps hearing on the media that the science is settled on all this, and we should listen to the science. He says, but I personally don't know any scientist in private who thinks that this is the right way to manage this. Yeah, and he of all people, full professor tenured at Harvard in epidemiology, would have known what's what in the profession. He said nobody agrees with this stuff. This is all just insanity. I'm not sure where they're getting this idea that everybody agrees. The problem was that Fauci was so powerful, people were professionally unwilling to stick their necks out to disagree with him. So he was kind of exercised Ceausescu like powers over medical science, as incredible as that seems.
And the people linked to him were controlling the legacy media. So I imagine that we saw it, we felt it. Anybody who spoke out against it with common sense or data or anything contrary to this narrative was just automatically shut down. So I guess that was the tactic to the censorship tactic, which worked really well because it made other people afraid to speak out. Because, one of my biggest questions is, why is everyone so cowardly? Like, where are all the amazing immunologists and doctors and biochemists and geneticists? Like, where are they? Why aren't they speaking out against this? Because you don't have to look very hard to see that there's a problem here. Like, you can pick anything you want. The pseudo-uridinylation, the technology itself, the lipid nano, you can pick anything you want. And you will find problems very quickly with one aspect or all of them. I mean, I'm looking at all of them, and the entire thing is problematic. And the fact that they picked the spike protein, of all things, I remember back in the day, you remember too, I'm sure, like some people were wondering, like, why are you picking that? Why don't you pick something a little less ferocious? Well, I think it's linked to the proximal origin story. I think there's more going. I'm not gonna say this now, but I think there's a lot more going on in terms of why they picked the spike protein than most people know about at this point. I think it was very purposeful.
Can you explain that really quickly? Like, why would the origin relate to the choosing of the spike protein as the immunological tool?
Well, it seems to me, besides the fact that they were warned against using the spike protein, like glycosylated spike proteins in general from Gallo. I mean, this was besides that warning. I'm pretty sure, I'm certain that the SARS-CoV-2 virus was made in a lab. It's a chimeric virus. The spike component was engineered, absolutely. There are endonuclease fingerprints in there, the furin cleavage site, why is there a proline there? Why is it out of frame, etc. There are all these fingerprints that very clearly indicate that this was definitely man-made. And that spike protein that came from the original Wuhan chicken recipe was the template that they used in the first, batches of the Moderna and the Pfizer products. I guess, they double mutated the prolines for some reason, they say, to keep it in the pre-fusion state. And, they modified it in other ways, the mRNA, that is, by subbing in the N1 methyl pseudouridines. But the coding material was the same. And the idea was to have your cells translate this very same spike protein, which of course would be glycosylated as part of the process. It was a stupid and dangerous idea. And anybody who knows anything about this, like I just said, would have anticipated a number of problems with selecting this particular sequence of amino acids that would fold into this specific spike protein as the immunological activator. It's not the best word to use, but you know what I mean.
So in other words, you engineer a virus, and the crude thought there is that to protect against the virus, you reverse engineer it.
Yeah. And the argument was like, we shouldn't be there. Let me phrase it this way. An argument is that it's stupid to use one single immunological target to immunize against an entire pathogen. The best thing to do, of course, is to undergo natural infection and gain natural immunity, because then you have broad protection against a range of proteins from the virus and all the other components for life. So people argued that it was dumb to use one component, the spike protein, because then you're going to have inferior immunological robustness. You're just going to have, the antibodies and the T cells and all this stuff specifically targeting the spike protein and the epitopes therein. But my point, besides that being true, is that it's because of what the spike protein is, and because it has these specific sequences inside of it, like human homologs, for example. There are many published studies on this. This is why we're seeing autoimmunity, coming from the people who've been multiply injected with these things, because the immune system is not only mounting an attack against those little bits within the spike protein, they're mounting an attack against the human proteins that have 100% identity with those. I've written 20 articles on the different components that, for example, supercharge your immune system with super antigen sites within the spike protein. Molecular mimicry inducing autoimmunity from these little peptides in the spike protein. This explain, like there's I think it's called TLQRR. I can't remember. It's a sequence of 5 nucleotides that is a human homolog associated with thrombotic issues. The list goes on and on. It's hard for me to believe, after everything that I've seen and how long I've been looking at this, that it's really hard for me to say this, but it's hard for me to believe that this wasn't engineered to be damaging. And that's why I'm so appalled that this very spike protein is the same one that they used. They took its coding material and wrapped it in lipid nanoparticles and injected it into everybody under mandate. I mean, a lot of people are saying they're trying to kill us. And I'm much more diplomatic than that. I'm like, well, I don't know if that's true, because I believe there's a lot of ignorance as well at play. But you have to ask yourself, like, why would anyone in their right mind allow this to happen? It can't be that they didn't know. We had bioinformatics tools. We had people working on these things. We have an enormous community of intelligent people with expertise all over the world who not only could, but did sound the alarm on many of these. Like I said, it's published in the literature now. If you want to see the references, just look at my Substack. I've documented this whole paper, this whole thing. I know this is a bit of a rant, but I'm just like, because I'm reliving all of this now by going back into these emails and being reminded.
I'm doing the same thing. I'm going through the same thing. One of the things that probably it's impossible to list. We all have what we consider to be the most shocking feature of the COVID response. But for me, I still can't get over the fact that I was told by top FDA, NIH officials that a major reason for social distancing, lockdowns, masking, plexiglass, stay-at-home orders, and everything else was to delay the onset of natural immunity, to delay rising seroprevalence levels, to delay endemicity until after the shots were online. So it wasn't just that all these tactics, these sort of social engineering tactics, were designed to, keep us well. No, it was exactly the opposite. It was to keep us from gaining a natural capacity to resist the virus, so that they could wait until the injection came along, so the injection could be deployed and experimented upon us, and thereby get all the credit for having solved the issue. And that sounds like a wild conspiracy theory, but that's what they meant by flatten the curve. Flatten the curve meant delay prolong the pain, delay the solution. And it sounds crazy until you hear it from people who were there on the ground, in the agencies, in the companies, watching all this unfold. And multiple sources have confirmed this without a shadow of doubt in their mind, that was the real purpose of the school closures, the business shutdowns, the stay-at-home orders, the travel restrictions, everything, to delay the point at which we would have essentially solved the problem through natural exposure and immune upgrades.
Do you remember when they started unlocking everyone, how every single person was saying, I've been sick as a dog ever since they let us all out? I remember specifically my friends in Australia were like, Jess, like, you just don't understand. They started like releasing us from our captivity and everybody's getting sick. And that made sense to me, because when you're isolated the way that we all were, and you're not exposed, to everything you're exposed to every day, you're not tickling your immune system. So when you get back out there, even the smallest thing might set you off, because everybody was stressed out. Everyone's immune system was probably crashing because they were like this because of watching the TV and how everyone's dying. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like that might not have been deliberate, but that was the outcome.
The lockdowns, I get the impression the lockdowns profoundly disturbed the place of the human person within the natural patterns of the microbial kingdom. We're meant to be integrated. We're meant to experience sort of constant normal organic exposure in the normal course of normal life. So disturbing that profoundly made us weak, made us sick, and made us more vulnerable than we were ever before. Then comes a shot, which just only added to the bumps. So what a catastrophe. Well, let's get back to the emails, to the diaries just a little bit. There are things about it that stand out to me. I was amazed to see that on April 23rd, 2020, Trump exploded in a rage against Birchie and Fauci, and said, Birx and Fauci, and said, you have destroyed the country. You lied to me. I never should have trusted you. You've created a disaster for me. So that was April 23rd. He found himself a little bit stuck, though. He couldn't really fire them because of Fauci's fame and the way the media was celebrating him all the time. He felt like that would be politically unwise to publicly turn against him. So he tolerated him for that reason, which is a real tragedy. But he did try to start opening the country, but unsuccessfully so. So that's one of many things that jump out to me. Other points stick out to you?
Yeah, Trump also promoted hydroxychloroquine. That was never a secret. And when I was digging today, these dozens of medical professionals and people doing off-label trials in their own clinics all over the world were telling him, these drugs are working, and hydroxychloroquine was one of them. And so, again, no, we can't have anything functional, because if there's a solution, we won't be able to EUA these new experimental products. I mean, that's what happened. And they went right down the line with it, right to the childhood schedule so that they could make these stupid things liability free. Like the whole thing, I mean, it's tragic. And I believe that with some more digging from you, me, and everybody else who's looking, and with these phone calls, we're literally going to see them talking about this way before the fact. I mean, not just this, the SPARS pandemic, or not just Event 201. I mean, something specifically talking about what these people did here, like, these little hush-hush conversations that were never supposed to come to light. I mean,
and in particular on the hydroxychloroquine example, the British Empire throughout the 19th century knew for sure that what's it called, quinine in tonic water, served as an anti-malarial, a very effective sort of therapeutic, and that's how it came to be that the gin and tonic became the national drink of British imperial days. And so here we are, skip forward 2 centuries, and this knowledge is gone. You can't even buy hydroxychloroquine at your own pharmacy because BARDA, which is the Biological Advanced Research, I don't know what, Defense something, I don't remember what it's called, but it's a division of ASPR, which is under NIH, had 2 successive heads, both of whom leveled a massive attack on hydroxychloroquine and effectively pulled it from the shelf.
Which is just, I mean, it's one thing not to promote it, but it's another thing. It's quite another thing to actively stop it being available by going to the pharmacy route, for example, and making and the doctor route, like making it under threat of loss of license if you prescribed it. I mean, same thing with ivermectin. I mean, why did nobody question the fact that it wasn't up to the individual or the individual and their doctor privately to decide a course of action that they thought was best? You know what I mean? Like, I will never I swear to God, I'll never get over what happened. It's just like whichever way you look at it, it was criminal from A to Z. Ivermectin is, like, for people who don't know, it won a Nobel Prize, cures river blindness. It's safe for pregnant women, for crying out loud. I mean, this is a decades-long safe, proven drug. And when I say that, I mean it. It's like, it doesn't mess you up. And I mean, that's why the FLCC came into existence from Paul Merrick and Pierre Corey. I mean, they had data in their hospital, in their clinics. They ran their own trials that demonstrated its efficacy. No need to go to the hospital. No need to be on event.
Mary Talley Bowden in Texas was running her own clinic and was completely at a loss, read about ivermectin, gave it to her patients, saw that they all recovered very quickly and were very grateful. So she became a sort of top source of it. But then had her license attacked by the Texas Medical Board, and she's been fighting for 6 years over this.
I think she still is.
So right? Yeah, she still is. She's still fighting she keeps having to shoot them down one by one. It's unbelievable. So here's a question for you. I wonder if you have an answer to this, because the baby virology would observe that there are 2 broad classes of viruses, one of which is stable, like smallpox or measles or chickenpox or these kinds of things, and against which one can vaccinate in a sterilizing way, maybe not without consequence or risk of injury or so, but generally speaking, in an isolated sense, they can be vaccinated against. And there's another class of viruses that are forever mutating. They tend to be widespread. They tend to be transmissible, but they're always mutating. There's always a new variant. Clearly, SARS-CoV-2 was of the latter type. I mean, that was easily known from the very earliest days we even knew anything about it. We knew that much. What? So here's my question: do you think that the emergence of new variants was a surprise to Fauci, and in which case, why did they ever think that what they were calling a vaccine would be in any sense successful? Why did they think they could outrun the brilliance of the microbial kingdom with their laboratory shots?
I'm trying to find the screenshot that I took that answers this question directly. Of course, it was never going to work. You can go right back to I think it was 2005 with SARS when they tried to create vaccines and it was a mass failure. RNA viruses mutate really fast, and it was never going to not be that way. And in a milieu where you're injecting everybody in the population, regardless of demographic, at the same time, while the thing is actually, at its highest infectiousness rate, whatever, what you're going to do is effectively push it to mutate more. And you might even do it in a way that it becomes more virulent. Like that's what Van Bosch has been saying this whole time. It's like, this is the stupidest thing anyone's ever done biologically, because you could actually turn this into something really deadly when it wasn't. It was like the flu. And it was never going to work. And Fauci knew that. I will find the email where he actually says that we know that this thing is going to mutate quickly, but we just don't have the data yet. Something banal like that. It was another conversation he had with another expert who was asking about the mutation of this virus because it's an RNA virus, specifically what you just said. And of course he knew. I mean, okay, he's a TV doctor and he hasn't been in a lab or, touched a pipette in how many years, who knows if he ever did. But still, I mean, the guy should know. No, not should know. The guy knows. The guy knows that this was never going to work.
I mean, I knew that. Exactly. My mother knows that. Yeah.
So yeah, it's.
So what was his plan? I don't understand what his plan was. I mean, this is where it's just I get confused because I could see that he wanted to use lockdown until vaccination.
An mRNA therapy against that.
Well, but how is he going to escape accountability? I mean, like if he knew that the shot wasn't going to work, then that's the other thing that emerges from the diaries. He's Rochelle Walensky, who's the head of the head of the CDC, I think following Redfield, right? Wants to tell the public that the shot doesn't work for stopping transmission, and he's livid with her about it, and demands that she not do that. And then finally, I think I'm going to say she delayed this announcement several months until she couldn't stand it anymore, and finally just announced it. I think maybe, probably, most likely against his wishes. That was August of 2021, at the very time the mandates were going into full force.
Yeah, interesting, that relationship, because they were, I don't know if you saw these posts that I made, but prior to Walensky getting voted in, or however they do it, appointed, they were, Fauci was getting pissed off with Redfield, and, there was headbutting. And so they were looking for a woman to replace him as CDC director. And because of Fauci, this is in the emails, because of him, he suggested her. Rochelle got in. I must say, I feel a little compassionate toward her for a number of reasons, even though I'm still holding her accountable, because I will never forget that hearing when her and Fauci were together with their double masks, saying they knew nothing about the death count in VAERS. And I was screaming at my screen. I'm like, it's 11,000! I can't remember who was asking. It might have been Senator Johnson. Very simple question. How many deaths are in VAERS right now? And both of them, and I know why now, they answered the same. And they made this joke about how you can get hit by a car and killed on your way out of a meeting. And, their point was that VAERS isn't reliable. And they both used the same ridiculous example about how anyone can enter anything into VAERS for any reason. Now I know that she was in lockstep with him, probably because she was under pressure. Because it was very clear that even though they thought maybe she was going to be less of a problem than she was, I imagine she was more of a problem than any of us know to them, because she had a conscience. I feel bad for her.
I do too. There's certain figures in this drama that for whom I have some empathy, sympathy, something, and maybe not a lot, but some. And she's one of them. Another one is David Morens, poor guy. Fauci threw him under the bus in hopes that they would not eventually get to him. And Morens was always faithful servant of Fauci throughout his whole career. And did whatever Fauci wanted, but then Fauci just pretended like he didn't know. I don't know. His office is down the street or something. I don't know. Just like blew him off. I mean, it's just Morens is a guy who said in emails that he'll probably go to jail and he'll be so glad.
Wow.
Because in jail he'll be able to tell the truth.
Wow. Wow. You just blew my mind. That's so revealing as to his state of mind, the pressure that he's under to finally be free, to be honest as a human. Wow. That's powerful, dude.
Yeah. No, I think Morens is quite brilliant, creative. Probably culpable in many ways, just like Walensky. Okay, one other thing that I want to mention, maybe we won't just make it one other thing, but one thing that I didn't, it's like a lot of things in the diary, you think maybe I knew this, but there's something about the diaries that makes it just crystal clear, and it's kind of mind-blowing. So one of them is that the very first booster was completely political. It wasn't recommended by the FDA or even the CDC or anybody else. It was just it was pushed out there by forces that Fauci controlled over against the advice of the FDA. And in fact, the FDA lost its top two vaccine virologists who resigned in protest over the first booster, and that becomes very clear in the diaries, where Fauci's like, well, I'm sorry to see them go, but this has got to happen.
Yeah, well, that might be because Fauci knew that. Yeah, I don't know. I have a few feelings on this, which goes back to what Gallo was saying about, the antibody response. I believe that Fauci knew that these things were never going to work, and that the antibody response would be suboptimal. Let's be nice. That the neutralizing antibody response was going to be very suboptimal, and that, the effectiveness was, quote unquote, vaccine effectiveness was going to wane. And that obviously became clear as time passed, because the experiment rolled on and we started collecting the real life data, the real world data in the human experimental subjects. And of course, they weren't working because the virus was smarter, basically, because of its nature and its mutation rate, et cetera. Of course, it's going to win the race with the immune system. Something to do with the immunological disruption caused by these injections as well. So, I mean, besides making money, besides having all of these products like sitting on pallets that they had to use, that was the incentive. Like, we need to use these things. There might have been another. What would be the word? Another insert adjective motive that Fauci knew about, that was going to draw out, this might sound a bit weird, I'm phrasing this for the first time now, to draw out the adverse event profile in certain people who are experiencing them, if you catch my drift. Because if you re-stimulate the immune system and you don't, say, have a shift in IgG subclass to IgG4 where you become tolerized, which happened in a lot of people, then what that's going to do is it's going to boost, it's going to raise the response that was already generated, that is high, in the form of memory cells. It is going to resurge that response, and you're going to see, like, if you measured the specific antibodies, you would see that they would rise, which, if you did come into contact with SARS, would probably have some kind of effect. We don't know exactly. If you know what I'm saying here, I think that they were like, oh shit, another variant. Oh shit, look, it's mutating. Oh shit, we need to come up with a new, the XBB. They kept doing this partly because they wanted to sell products, but I think also partly because they knew they effed up and that people were going to start looking real sick and perhaps dying, which they were, but it was going to be much more apparent. I might be wrong about this, but that's my feeling right now. I mean,
wow,
some of the adverse events that we're starting to see cancers roll in now like we never have before. And it kind of did start happening around 2021. We need to start sequencing people's tumors. Like, we need to start staining them, doing immunohistochemical studies to look for, signs of amyloids, for example. We need to start looking for the component parts of the plasmids. If we find them, then we have definitive evidence. I mean, all of these things that need to be done right now to save people's lives, to bring to light that nobody should get injected with this stuff anymore, not even one person. It's all going to be delayed. I imagine maybe in 5 years they're going to start doing this, but 5 years too late, man. Like, how many more people are going to die and get sick? Because of stuff we know.
Right. The industry is panicked about this relationship between the shots and rising incidence of cancer. And we know this because Charlotte Cooper-Wasser and her co-author at Brown University wrote a paper, it was like, came out 4 months ago in the journal Oncotarget that that identified signals for the very first time, at least that, I mean, other people had identified the signals, but that was actually published in a peer-reviewed place. The journal was taken offline. The paper was made inaccessible. I had to get a copy of it myself.
A DDoS attack was done on the journal, like on the actual website, I believe is the right term, for like a week. You couldn't download the paper.
Yeah, that's right. And we hosted it ourselves, and we got thousands of more than 5,000 downloads in a 24-hour period. But that is a tremendously that is a terrifying prospect. The connection between those two things is like the unsayable reality. And I think you're right. It's going to take about probably 5 years, and it'll be known, at least under the current trajectory. And Jessica, let me just wrap it up here by saying these are great days in a sense, but the tragic days, but the great days. But after 6.5 years, we're finally seeing, a shift. Like we've moved from massive censorship to just tiny leaks from our crowd. The dissidents saying things, and now suddenly there's a tsunami of information flowing all over the place, and all we're waiting for is for people to care and take an interest in it. Which, if the last week has taught me anything, is that we cannot rely on mainstream legacy media sources for any information on this. They're just not interested. They will not report it. They've chosen their They're team Fauci, and they are going to go down with the ship.
Yep. It's just a matter of time. And may I say that we might be on the end of the tipping point, because I think this is a little bit exponential. Like it took a while to get here, but I think the snowball is, it's been growing slowly, but I think it's just going to get like really big, really fast. And a lot of people who might have thought that it was a good idea to protect villains, like that woman that interviewed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the other day, baseless, statements about, come on now. Come on, dude. Come on. Read a scientific study and answer his question. Like, that's all, it's crazy. I would hope that there are people who are out there now who understand. And I've been saying this for years, man. If you come to the light, if you reveal the truth, you will be welcomed. You will not be, yes, some people are culpable and did really bad things, but most people were just scared to come forward, to tell the truth, it's stupid high school peer pressure is what it is, with the legacy media. Stop bowing down to masters who would throw you under a bus in 2 seconds, man, and just come out and be honest. You will feel so much better about yourself. Your kids will have someone to be proud of. Just consider the possibility that you might, not that you might be wrong, that others might actually be right. They might have a point. Use the Socratic method. Ask yourself the questions. Wow, all of a sudden I'm speaking to the whole world.
Yeah, and we will welcome them and we will celebrate them, right? That's right. That's right. All right, Jessica, I think we're probably going to have to do this again in a few weeks. But I'm so grateful to you for all your work for so many years. And also the fact that you're so diligently reading these pages. I think it's wonderful. And I'm proud to be in this battle with you and to call you a colleague.
Me too.
Thank you.
Sometimes I wish we could just be in a library, all of us together, pining through these dots on pages. I'm obsessed. I couldn't stop if I tried because I'm too curious. I know curiosity is going to kill the cat, but whatever. At least I'll have fun.
Thank you, Jessica. All the best.
Bye.